one. Live, go.
Hello, I am Marjory Blumenthal, a Senior Fellow and Director of Science, Technology, and International Affairs at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It is truly my pleasure to introduce two colleagues who will be joining me in a discussion today of how artificial intelligence can benefit science in different ways. First, let me note that my own long history in science and technology policy has included work with computer and other scientists on the rise and evolution of computational science, for which artificial intelligence suggests new horizons. This is a great time to take stock of the kinds of opportunities that are now feasible, perhaps understand where reality falls short of the hype of AI, and consider how different kinds of research can benefit from different kinds of artificial intelligence. With me today are Ross King, a machine learning expert responsible for the concept of a robot scientist, who holds joint positions at the University of Cambridge and the Chalmers Institute of Technology in Sweden, and is a fellow of the Alan Turing Institute in London. Hiroaki Kitano is a robotics expert and executive with different ideas about autonomous systems to conduct science. His several roles include president and CEO of Sony Computer Science Laboratories, leadership in multiple professional societies, and a professorship at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University. So to start us off, why do you think it is important to use AI more in science? Hiroaki, would you like to start?
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. I think, use of AI for scientific discovery is very important in order to accelerate the speed of, discovery in scientific discipline, particularly when you have to handle the very complex phenomena or as well as the large scale data, particularly biomedical science, maybe the material science, and can be applied to engineering as well. In two ways. One is we are not really good at handling large scale data or extract knowledge from a large volume of articles, for example. AI never has to digest the data and then extract knowledge from the large body of papers. That's kind of, we have a scale merit and uncover the what we have already known. And then at the same time, AI and robotics combined together will be able to automate the experiment process at high precision, and just like what the Ross have achieved in the Adam and Eve, which is very landmark accomplishment, and then his study afterward. So I think we have opportunity of using AI in the large scale data and knowledge handling and automation. At the same time, I think a third avenue, is signified by the recent success in the DeepMind AlphaFold, for example, to be able to predict the protein structure at high precision. And, that kind of, machinery can be built by the AI. Right now, the protein structure, but I think we can have more of those. And that enable us to, understand and predict what's going on in a cellular system or a biological system. So I think from the different aspect, AI can push a boundary of their scientific activity, what we can do in science. What we cannot do today, will be able to enable by the AI in the future.
So I think a number of the issues that you've teed up, we will unpack in this conversation, but I want to let Ross also make some opening comments on why AI is important to science.
Okay, I suppose one thing is, I think it needs to be said that, because it's often sort of taken for granted about, our society is fundamentally based on science and technology. It's a miracle how many people live so well nowadays. Ordinary European citizens live much better than kings did, hundreds of years ago. They have better food, better medical care, more opportunities for travel. It's incredible how rich and healthy we are at the moment, and that's based on science and technology. But the world is faced by, many threats. We have climate change, we're living through a pandemic, there's food insecurity, billions of people still live in poverty, and I think the only way to tackle these issues is through better science and technology. And there is a possibility through AI to do better, to make science more efficient. And so that's the one big issue. And the other issue is in many areas of science, there's a problem with reproducibility. So that a large amount of money is spent on, say, biomedical research, which is on research that can't be repeated in other labs. And that's not because of anything to do with fraud or anything. It's just that the biological systems are so delicate that it's hard to reproduce them. And AI and automation open up a path to making that science a bit more reproducible, shall we say.
I may want to come back to that aspect, but both of you have touched on automation. Ross referred to efficiency, Rocky referred specifically to automation. So I'd welcome having both of you address what is it about robotics as opposed to perhaps other kinds of AI that can be special in science. Rocky, would like to start?
Oh, yes, I think like a combination of AI and robotics give us a powerful tool to do science in a way that the AI will be able to recognize things and then come up with the hypotheses that need to be tested. The robotics will do the real experiment. And then not just like automate things, but like because of robotics, because of the precisions, the repeatability, precisions of the experiment will be much better than what a human will possibly do. For even a very simple thing like doing the PCR or doing the pipetting and a little small dose into the cell culture, and then the precision will be much better with well-designed robotics experiment system, and it's repeatable. And the implication of that is the outcome. Kind of deviation, if that is actually intrinsic deviation caused by the diverse reaction of the cell, we can take that statistically because it's intrinsic to the biological system. But if that is introduced by the noise and experimental procedure, and we can significantly reduce that part, so we can see the genuine diversity, statistical diversity of the cellular response. So that means like we have like a much more precision. That means we can probably use much less resource. I mean, much smaller number of cells, small number of reagent. So that means that we can be more precise and we can repeat at high precisions, and then we can do more experiment with giving the same amount of the resource. I think there are a number of things that advantage by using robotic system and experiment side.
Ross.
Yes, I think that Hiraki is correct about all these things, and of course it's fundamental to science that you need to do experiments. Now that's what they realized back in the 17th century in the scientific revolution, that you can't just think about how the world works. You actually need to test and interrogate the world, and robots give AI systems the ability to do that.
So if I could ask you just then to follow up on that point. If I look at robots in other domains, or thinking about manufacturing and so on, I have been surprised at how, yes, there has been progress, but in some ways, there still are challenges with pick and place activities, putting a robot in an unstructured environment.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you can start us on a consideration of what might be different as technology evolves in 10 years from what we could do today.
Yeah. Well, I think like a complexity of the environment impacts a lot in what robot can do. In industrial robotics, which is commonplace, and that actually driving our society right now, it is in the professional environment, structured environment. So like we can design everything we need for the robot to smoothly functions, and there's no intervention. The people don't intervene. So that's kind of highly structured environments that we know how to do the robotics there. Okay, completely the other side is like an open-ended world, which is like an autonomous driving vehicle. Like you never know like what happened in the streets, like whether like it's just jumping out from the corner and things like that. That's kind of level of uncertainty is very high, and that's we have a problem. We still haven't solved the every problem to comfortably navigate autonomous driving system in any environment. In some environment, like a highway, we can kind of constrain what happens. So that's much more comfortable. But in the cities where the little people just like walking randomly, we're not very comfortable doing. Scientific experiment is somewhere in the middle. It's more unstructured than the factory, but it's more structured by the city. Because this is more the professional environment, but a number of things we wants to be able to do, and they can set up can change every day. Depends on what kind of experiment you want to do, and so I think in the lab we can actually have like a more structured environment, which is like a genomic facility or metagenomic facility, which is more procedure determined. So we can comfortably introduce a robotic system out there, and which is already there. What the challenge is, kind of experiment that you have to go through the multiple different procedures every time you do things. Something slightly different come out, and then to do the experiment, you have to go through several different machinery, and then it depends on the outcome. You have to slightly adapt to the next procedure, and that actually has like a much more variability in the environment. That's where things are challenging, but I think we can solve that problem. We can come up with the robotic system, comfortably navigate through that environment, and then do the proper experimental procedure by itself. So I think like a research lab is actually the next step. I think very feasible to be able to create the large scale, highly efficient, and a precise robotic system to be able to do that.
Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's right. Hiraki's right about the labs being quite structured. It's not like home robots, which have to wander around your home cleaning toys up from the floor and things like that. It's much, but there are still some deep AI questions about, for an AI system to be able to use the equipment properly, it needs to understand what the different pieces of equipment are doing, and that's still a deep question, a deep problem in AI, how to explain. What does a centrifuge do to an AI system? Things like that. So it's harder than manufacturing, but it's still there are possibilities there, I think.
Yeah. Well, think like a simple like a protocol, like you shake things, shake like we understand it, whether shake properly, what I mean, that's the relatively undefined, and then you
Yes.
need to have a much procedure.
One of the problems is that many of what are called protocols, and you see in the back of a scientific paper, are more like cooking recipes than like a computer program. They say incubate overnight. What is a night?
Right. So you're actually verging on an important issue, which is what can AI not do today? What do people expect of AI that really is unrealistic? Are there barriers that are a concern or an objective of people looking to put more AI into science?
Well, I think one big challenge is how AI will be able to properly accumulate the knowledge from the papers or like a data, and come up with a structure, hypothesis worth testing, and that's like it really means that we should be able to kind of like a structure, like a formalize the the knowledge we want to discover, and that I think is challenging. If we define the field, define the kind of knowledge in a way that we can structure, I think we can do that. But of course, then there are much broader kind of boundaries not that clear what kind of knowledge you want to discover. So once we define the the kind of type of knowledge we want to define, we want to discover, then we can most likely we can do it. We can do it very well. At the same time, really novel original idea is very challenging. So I think that first of all, we don't really have to mimic human scientific discovery process. AI and a robotic system might have like a very different route, which a human not able to do. For example, even now, not every genes in that microbial, like E. coli or yeast, has not been characterized, and then we have to really, go into the reason why you cannot characterize is like, how can you actually convince people to, spend time with seemingly this important, for example, but like a robotic system will just do it, and AI will come up with the hypothesis for the every gene characterizations and the possible functionalities, and some of them could be very interesting. And so like we can actually go through the, whole search space of the hypothesis, and then run experiment to verify that. And that it's very difficult for the human to do because of the resource issues, the sociological issues, and also like we get tired, and then also like our value judgment, we're gonna focus on something we believe is important, but of course like our intuition may not be that good, and then then the robotic system we just go after something considered to be less important might come up with something really significant. So I think that would be the one use case. So that would be different style of scientific discovery than we do today.
Ross, what do you think?
Yes, one thing that's so the issues Hiraki mentioned are deep questions how to do these. One thing which the AI systems can't do still is like read a scientific paper properly, read and understand. We have text mining systems that can extract some information out of the text, but to really extract all the knowledge and understand is still way beyond the state of the art. That's sort of reading is what they call an AI complete problem. It's
yeah. And also, yeah, please go ahead. Yes.
Sorry. Yes, and one of the things we're trying to do is to have like try to classify these different levels of autonomy for AI scientific systems. Just like there's levels for self-driving cars. To say what can and can't we do to try to put some structure on what is possible and not possible at present.
So to actually follow up perhaps on the point that was just made about the levels and the earlier point about generating hypotheses. I know there are some people who view going from a hypothesis to some kind of testing of the hypothesis as the traditional way and argue that the AI systems let the data do the talking and you don't need a hypothesis. So the question I would have is, as we get better and better AI, do you think we will continue to need hypotheses? Is that part of the complementarity of humans with systems? Or will we end up with some really different way of generating knowledge that is liberated from hypotheses?
Well, I think my belief is like we still need a hypothesis generation mechanism because what is interesting is like can we actually come up create a hypothesis which is not available, which cannot be directly induced from the data, and then try to verify that. So it's if there's everything is data driven and then come up with like conclusions, and that's most likely to be the more the correlations or like a causality inference rather than generating hypothesis, and that will be limited by the in the area that you have abundance of the data. And some interesting discovery might come from somewhere, not many data is available, and we try to get the data to verify the hypothesis. That space is very exciting part. And, to drive the experiment to that space, we need a hypothesis, even though data is sparse. And then, if a hypothesis is considered to be, worth testing, we start getting a data by doing an experiment.
Ross, you want to add?
I'm quite old-fashioned about this. I like models and hypotheses and things like that. And of course, this reflects an old debate within the philosophy of science about, do things like electron, is it a real thing or just a sort of a feature of the models? Do they actually really exist, and are they useful and things like that? So it's interesting. These, a lot of AI is essentially sort of applied philosophy in many ways.
Well, I can see that. I'm interested in your views about whether AI will support new forms of big science or whether it will be more democratizing and facilitate small science. I know Hiroaki in the opening remarks referred to the AlphaFold protein folding. Obviously, that benefited from big compute, lots of talent, lots of resources, and so on. And only a few entities can do something at that scale. So I'm curious, how much do you think that progress will come from some of these big scale efforts, which may then be, the results may then be passed on to smaller teams?
Yeah, I think like AI scientists can go both ways. Like one is can have like a lot of large scale experimental facilities, a lot of data, and extensive computing power to discover something very serious. At the same time, small lab will be able to use the AI systems. For example, even the AlphaFold. Then. Now, I mean, it's a kind of open source versions and all the things available. Like, only thing you need to have is access to the cloud, computing cloud system. And then if this is before AlphaGo, when you wants to identify the structure of the protein, for example, like along the entire pathway, you have to have the X-ray crystallographer, you have to have all the facility, NMR, and everything to be able to identify that. Otherwise, you have no hope of doing, network-based interaction simulations of based on the structure. So you need a gigantic resource to do that. With this like computing approach, even a small lab will be able to do that, and then come up with with the specific experiment to be able to verify some of the hypotheses. So I think that benefit both large scale initiative as well as the small lab trying to get into something very interesting from their perspective, and then tap into the benefit of the large scale project.
Rob?
Yes. Both things are, as Hiraki said, I think both things are possible. And so as a traditional professor in a department, I'm intimidated by DeepMind and their resources, and but I think there's also a path you can imagine where there are things called cloud automation labs, where you have lots of automation in a central place, which you send your data samples to them, just like a cloud compute. So you send your data to the cloud. And there you can imagine some democratization of science, where the equipment's all there. You don't need to use it all at the same time. You can do small projects. You can imagine some future where that's possible, and making it more equal and more fair, and you don't need to have a lot of money and resources.
I mean, with the automation, if we can actually have the central service to, identify the sample and send the sample, do the really high precision experiment for, the client, then even the theoretical or computational biology lab will be able to get the original experimental data, which is less likely at this moment. But, if we can actually have the facility like that, I think it would be very different.
I was just thinking that this concept of broad sending to or using a centralized facility is a reinvention of the old service bureau model. And one could imagine different kinds of service bureaus, but certainly if you go back to the early days of computing, that did help to open the options to a lot of people. Yeah. I'm curious as to whether, as these changes unfold, does this reinforce team science, or might there be more opportunities for distributed individuals? I've looked at citizen science, for example, and sometimes there are individuals who are just passionate about science and interested, but there's only so much they can do without having access to capabilities.
Yeah, but I think at this moment, like we have a relatively sizable setup to do the automation, because we need robotics, we need the conventional, equipments, whatever it is. But that's actually, because it's an equipment assuming current modality of the experiments that human do things. But if like automated, we can do like everything into the micro fluidics, for example. Not everything, but the most of them. And then things will be different. So we can have like a desktop automated lab with all the modularized. and then send it the something really expensive things like mass or like genomics will send to the central facilities as well, or even you can do it on chip, for example. Then things would be much cheaper. That would be like a PC. So I think like now we are moving into the highly automated the central computing service or cloud service. But I think that will continue. But at the same time, some of the next generation experimental setup might be on the something like emergence of the PC. Back in the 70s.
Ross?
Yes. So at the moment, laboratory automation is very capital intensive and expensive to do, and it's expensive to run, high overheads and things like that. My colleagues in microfluidics and things like that, they dream of a pharmaceutical company in a box. You have everything which a large big pharma can do. You could do actually in a small box potentially. It's of course there are risks and dangers of having that capability as well, which yes.
Absolutely. But
I like that the pharmaceutical company in the box. That's a good. That's good. I like that.
Well, having had some or sat in on some conversations that were hosted in India, Zoom conversations about how in India there could be broader development of vaccines and pharmaceuticals and so on, even though more conventional facilities were the topic of conversation. The pharmaceutical company in a box, opens up a lot of possibilities when you think about the global South. So, and with the risks along with the benefits. Yes. So that leads to a transition to ask what you both think about as concerns for policymakers. How should policymakers think about the potential of AI to enhance science, containing the risks and so on? Ross, would you like to lead off on that one?
I think it's good to raise the issue with them. I think it's starting to appear on their radar. I'm trying to engage with policy leaders in Britain and in Sweden, and it is something which they haven't been aware of in the past, really. And they're quite conservative institutions, research councils and things like that. And most of the money goes to where it's gone before. It's hard to rearrange budgets and things. But I think there is the potential to get, some societal benefits from just making science more efficient. And I think AI has the potential to do that.
The comment on efficiency makes me think back to many situations where policymakers may have had difficulty understanding what the science was about, why it was important, because the results are so long-term. Efficiency is a concept that I think everybody, regardless of background, can appreciate. Hiroaki, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, in a way, the efficiency and the reproducibility, I think those are two issues which people consider as immediate benefit of making AI scientists or like automation of the science. That actually is well recognized. I mean, the long-term impact would be huge. At the same time, people. I understand like a policymaker having a difficulty understanding. What's going to happen, whether we should invest now, it is like, Ross and Hiroaki's dream and then yet too early. But I think like there's increasing number of, increasing interest in the scientific community as well as a policymaker. It just like, I hope like it's getting to the point like within the next couple of years to have, it became a serious policy agenda to be able to, invest more in a wise way to in AI for scientific discovery, in AI and robotics for scientific discovery. I think this is really important. I think from my background in AI and robotics, I think this is a single most important topic that we should challenge, because science is the foundation of civilization, and this will accelerate the science in a huge way. And given the difficulty we have, like a climate change and the resource issues, and then all the global agenda or planetary agenda, I would say, I mean, we need to accelerate the speed of scientific discovery. I think this is probably one of the best way to speed up the discovery to have a better future for us.
Ross, in some ways, what Hiroaki has just said connects back to what you said in your opening remarks about the world having a lot of big problems and how AI could help.
Yes, I think if everyone got together and we shared resources in the world, and then everything with existing technology, maybe we could do a lot of good. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't. My reading of history is that will not happen, and that we need better science and technology to save the planet.
I think that is something that we can all agree on, and I believe we are about at time. So I want to thank you both for sharing your thoughts and your experience. I think that for all of the concerns that many people have advanced about some of the risks that AI presents, you've offered us a very positive view of AI's contributions to the world and its problems. And we are grateful for that, and looking forward to the results that the both of you are contributing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that is it.